was to say, hey, we want CRT, our yield bearing token, to be like the best yield bearing token out there and to like represent an actively managed both for performance and for like risk management for you and say, hey, I have peace of mind to like buy and hold this, knowing that regardless of what the narrative is, um, the team is actively working to like position the assets to earn like the best return.
Welcome to Trailblazers. Today I'm here with James from Carrot. James, can you start off by kind of giving us a little intro about yourself and kind of how you got into crypto and then into Carrot?
Yeah, great to be here. So I'm James, also known as JSB. I've been full time in crypto, gosh, about 2 years now. I guess I went really full time about 2 or 3 weeks before the FTX crash happened. Good times. But before that, I ran a digital strategy agency for about 10 years. And I'm technical, I'm a developer, and frankly, at the time I was bored. And so I got into crypto just to kind of scratch that itch and found that I really loved it, and kind of, yeah, decided to move agency to the side of doing Web 2 work and go full time to Web 3. I actually bought my first like Bitcoin back in end of 2011. So a long time ago. It's when I graduated college. Now, of course, I didn't hold it. I sold it, whatever, go me. But it really wasn't until Solana came out that I kind of saw the future of, oh, this is useful. As a developer, sometimes you can look at the blockchain and say, man, that's actually like a really slow database. Like, why the hell would I write an application to like use this? And kind of always drilled into me this idea of, hey, use the blockchain for what it's good at. Don't try to make everything just on chain just because you can. And Solana was really the first time looking at kind of the founders, what totally his vision was, and everything that really inspired me to say, okay, like I see it. I see how we can like do meaningful stuff. I see how microtransactions can be incredibly powerful. I see how like financializing markets or the internet in different ways has a lot of potential, and kind of just fully red pilled and went in. Shout out to DA. DA is like what got me like in more communities and like meeting people and stuff. I rep my ape for that reason. Kind of love mono and you know harken back to the OGs.
Very cool. Can you kind of explain a little bit about like what Carrot is and like kind of why people would even use it?
Yeah, for sure. So before starting Carrot, my co-founder Jack and I we worked at Raindrops, which is a B&J Studios company, and we built the Raindrops protocol. And it was kind of centered towards NFTs and stuff, and we really wanted to move into DeFi. And there was this one piece of DeFi that I found really frustrating personally, and it was that there was all this feeling of FOMO of like, oh, you can do this, you can do this. Hey, you see these threads from people like, hey, follow my 3 steps, and you're getting this like 80% APY, and you're like, sick. But a lot of times my experience was seeing these advertised rates that were super high, 40, 50, 60, 100, 200% APY. But then my realized P&L sometimes was negative. I was kind of like, well, this sucks. Like, what the hell is going on here? And I hated even doing the most basic vanilla form of this, which we kind of consider as being, stablecoin lending. You go to Camino, you go to Drift, you go to MarginFi, Mango, whoever your flavor protocol that you deem is like the right place for you. You deposit that USDC or USDT, whatever, and you're getting this rate. Now the rate was variable and it left my wallet. Those are the kind of two main things I hated. I had to use like a portfolio or an aggregator app to kind of monitor stuff. Um, and it felt wrong that uh, my asset, let's say I had $10,000 or something, and I was like, oh, sick, I got $10,000. The reality is like our wallet is our homepage for crypto. And it felt wrong that like my wallet showed like a $2 balance rather than a $10,000 balance because that money was in Camino, like earning yield. And then you kind of see like, oh, rate spiked over here, and you're like, oh, can I withdraw and move over? And the more you touch yield bearing things, like the worse you do. Yield is a patient game. It's a, hey, let it sit. It's got to accrue. It's got to do its thing. Um, but this is part of the power of blockchain. And so Jack and I started from this premise of, hey, how do we make DeFi really easy and accessible for people that kind of fulfill some of our itch of, I wish it worked this way. And for us, that was the token. You come maybe to Solana for the first time, you buy a meme coin. Buying Carrot is the same like Rails as that. Like you spot and owned a token. It's incredibly simple. And that really has been our mission of hey, let's make DeFi accessible and easy for people to like own just this token, and not give them all these options. Even other platforms that offer like this yield aggregation service uh, eventually get really complicated. Like the OG example is like Yearn. Uh, Yearn was great. It started the simple premise of you wake up every day, who has the best rate? I'll publish that. I'll move it over. I'll get the best rate. The next day, I'll do the same thing. People loved it. But you go look at Yearn now, uh, there's like 40 or 50 options to choose from. It's really hard to understand what the difference is between them. And it just becomes a less and less approachable product. And so we wanted to create and make an avenue to participate in DeFi through tokenization that was friendly and easy for people to use. And so um, I'd say in our space, we mostly see a vault strategy. You go to a service provider or somebody who's offering the service of some sort, and you deposit in their vault. And then they have custody over your assets. They do stuff with it. They earn money for you, but it's in that vault. And we see a future where having token versions of those ends up just being better. And our mission is to make that clear and obvious, like why you want a token version of this thing rather than kind of a locked vault version of it.
Yeah, so given you guys like have like one strategy rather than 40, like what, like can you explain the specific strategy you chose and kind of why you think that strategy is kind of at least a good strategy to start for everybody?
Yeah, great question. Let me clarify one point. So one of the things that we wanted to be was to say, hey, we want CRT, our yield bearing token, to be like the best yield bearing token out there, and to like represent an actively managed both for performance and for like risk management for you, and say, hey, I have peace of mind to like buy and hold this, knowing that regardless of what the narrative is, um, the team is actively working to like position the assets to earn like the best return. And I can explain some of like the reason for that. So early on, like the main strategies we run now are lending aggregators, right? It's the most straightforward real yield in our space, and it's great. Now we offer like multi tokens in our pool. Sometimes you could think of what we do as like we're an index of stablecoins in some way. And the reason for that was a lot of times you'd see like rates on USDT kind of spike more than USDC, and like sometimes USDC has more volume in it, so there's like more capacity there. But those rates sometimes can like be flatter. Same with like PYUSD. And so with CRT, like you have exposure to all three of those. And though we don't transfer in between those assets and like swap, just because the swap fee might wipe out the potential gain of like moving over there. It does give you exposure to all those. So oftentimes our average rate of what we're earning is above kind of the average or even the top line USDC rate, simply because like there's everything in there. Now let's take this one step further. More and more strategies are becoming in vogue or being executed in a way that like meets our requirements of not giving you directional risk, which was important to us. And something like that is like hedge delta neutral JLP. So, I mean, I've talked to 5 or 6 teams who have developed their own hedge delta neutral JLP strategy. JLP is a great yield bearing asset. Doing a delta neutral on it is very tricky. It's hard to execute. But if you can, there's big numbers there for you to earn like really, really great returns in a stable or at least like not directionally exposed way. And so we've already integrated, Neutral Trade has a great hedge delta neutral product. We've integrated that into the vault. And so like our holders are benefiting and getting, oh gosh, it's like, what are we getting right now? We're getting 18-ish%. Um, simply because they have exposure to that. So they didn't have to think about, oh, this is a hot new thing. Let me go swap and like put it into a new vault and kind of choose their one isolated risk profile. Our goal is to say, hey, you just trust us that we're going to manage that risk for you and be better suited to do that, and always have exposure to more strategies than just like the basic vanilla stuff. That you might just do on your own as like a single venue strategy.
Yeah, that makes sense. So like a lot of times when I'm trying to kind of get people to first start using crypto, I'm like, look, you can get 15%. You're earning
Yeah,
0% with
yeah,
your money in a bank. And then a lot of people still kind of feel hesitant because they're like, well, nothing's for free. Like, So what kind of risks do you feel like people are taking by even like holding USDC in the first place? And
Mm.
then kind of how do you think that risk kind of, or what risk is between like just holding USDC and like holding Carrot, and how should people kind of think about that?
Yeah. Honestly, it really depends on like risk management is this interesting topic, I think, in crypto, like at large. A lot of people like to talk about it, but not a lot of people like have the skill sets to properly evaluate and like have an opinion about it. Risk management. Sometimes I've seen users give us this feedback of like it's kind of like it feels more risky. Okay, like quantify it. Like tell me like is an extra 10%. Sometimes people we would get this feedback of bear market, we were getting like 7%, 8%, 9%, pretty regularly, which isn't great. Like that's like a few points above risk-free rate T-bills. And like that's probably like not enough. And some people would say, oh, like risk management, you got to do this, whatever. And then I say, well, what if our rate was 20%? They'd be like, screw it. Great. I'm all in. I don't care. And you're like, okay, interesting. So like between there is this delta that represented to you a quantified metric of what the risk profile change was and what made it worth it versus not worth it as like a safe asset. The reality is Carrot brings a lot more risk to the table than just holding USDC. Mostly because it's made mostly of USDC itself. But like you're getting added the 5 protocols that we integrate to. You get every protocol's risk in there. You get our own tokens risk. Though we've been double audited, and that's like great, and we didn't want to launch before like having those things in place. It's still a reality. It's still there. Part of our pitch is to say what Carrot represents is like a 24/7 monitoring service that is constantly doing that risk management evaluation and like response to bad scenarios for those 5 protocols so that you don't have to. The reality, if you were to like be on crypto Twitter all day and kind of see the announcement that this black swan event was happening and drift was cascading, it was this waterfall event of things are going bad. Our program and a monitoring service is going to remove our funds from drift like way faster than you as a user is ever going to open your browser, get into your wallet, connect to the site, send a transaction, and hope it lands. Uh, just like that's a fact. And so that's part of the pitch is saying, hey, though we do bring more risk to the table, what we're hopefully like giving you is a better rate than a single venue strategy. And this idea of there's an active team and system that is monitoring and working to protect your assets in the event that like something happened. Now, getting normies in is always a hard thing. I talk to friends all the time of sometimes they'd rather me tell them it's 9%, which is still great, than like tell them, hey, I'm earning 20. Like it's just really hard to believe. And so we do our best to say, hey, we never want to be a black box. Hey, let me explain it to you. Let me show you like where this is coming from. Hey, this is programmatic yield. It's set this way. It's not a fixed rate. This is what happens. These are the conditions. Here are the risks. Um, and work to like educate people more about it. But at some level, the results speak for themselves, and if it's high enough, kind of gets over that hurdle of okay, it's worth it, to like take on those risks.
Yeah. And kind of going a little further into that, like I guess you mentioned like maybe 7% might not be enough. Like how do you see the difference between like DeFi yield and like the
Mm.
risk-free rate, and how where it's worth it and where it's not worth it? Because obviously if they're the same, it doesn't it's obviously not worth it. But like where
Right.
do you kind of see the difference?
Yeah, everyone's situation is different. Um, Kind of part of your question is asking us to compare, like, hey, who do we compete against? In some way, every DeFi protocol, we're all competing for dollars. Like, we're all trying to say, deploy your dollar into us so that we can earn a yield and like earn a performance fee on that. Um, and so it's hard to believe that like what we do with Carrot, something like we compete with meme coins. At one point our TVL was like 4.5 million, which is great. And as the bull market started to heat up a couple weeks ago, we had a drawdown of like 1.5 million. We're at like 3.25 now. And at first glance, you're kind of like, oh, that sucks. Why aren't people like sticking in here? Um, but on second thought, we kind of looked at it and said, oh, like this is great. Like traders park their assets here to earn yield, and as a result, are going to have more purchasing power when it's time to deploy those assets to execute whatever strategy they're doing. And what's been really fun to see is that we haven't like hit that level again. Uh, we have seen people like make trades, have wins, and like come back and like redeposit into it. And so everyone's kind of like in a different scenario of how do you view idle funds? Is everything deployed all the time? Do you have directional risk at all times, which people want to have for Sol a lot of times, which makes sense. Um, our general benchmark though is we hope to be double the risk free rate at like a bare minimum. Like that feels enough to say if right now like 4.5, 5 maybe if you're lucky. Um, we want to be like 9, 10 somewhere there. And lately we've been in the like 15, 16 to 20 percent APY on like a 7-day rolling average kind of deal. And that feels like a little more adequate for taking on those risks.
Yeah, that feels kind of intuitive. So I think one thing that kind of differentiates you guys from maybe like other protocols like Lulo or like just depositing into MarginFi on your own is like the
Yep.
token. So like
Yes.
what do you think is kind of important about the token? And then like are you guys thinking of using the token as collateral in the future or something like that?
Absolutely. I think in all the ways a token is better. I can maybe come with it if I want to be like really generous. There's some ways that it's not that are hard, which we've come to learn. But here's what a token gives you. One, a token gives you um, more visibility into the performance of what's going on. So like that market price, no matter what wallet you want, you don't have to connect to our app to see it. Just pull it up, and like that market price is giving you an indication of, okay, it was $100 when I bought it, and now it's $102.70. Like that represents like a 2.7% return since the inception of the fund. It's clear and intuitive. It's right there. Two, it's now liquid, and so no matter what, you can always like exchange that. One thing that's nice with what we do, and this is similar to like how our token is like an LST to Sol, in that there's like no slippage between getting in and out of Carrot when you come through the protocol, because it's a conversion rate. It's not like a curve, which is really nice. But the big part truly is being able to use it as collateral. It's an asset. Like just because like this is the same as like you're taking a loan against your portfolio, right? Taking a portfolio loan. It's an over collateralized loan that you're going to take at some loan to value ratio that says, hey, I've got $1 million in the market. If I need to, I can sell it. It's fairly liquid to like pay back that loan, so I'm not too worried about it. But I don't want to sell it because of capital gains, being triggered and all that. And so that is absolutely the end goal. Like we want everyone to look at like all the venues out there that we work with to say, hey, Carrot is like a worthwhile collateral to take because it's liquid, it's fully backed, fully collateralized, and it's always appreciating, which is like beneficial for like idle funds that are waiting to be traded, like should be earning yield up until the very moment that they're like swapped out or like put into action. Um, and then the last part that some people find super valuable, some people don't, but it's more tax efficient, right? When you're earning interest in the traditional way, like into your bank account, or even like something like Lulo, like that should be treated as income, um, and taxed at your income rate right then. Whereas for Carrot, it's appreciating. That token value is going up. You're not getting more units of it, and so you're not going to pay capital gains on that until you break it. Like you sell it, dispose the asset. Um, and yeah, opens up the door of like you can hold a huge position, take loans out to get access to cash when you need it, and like pay those back, which is a huge benefit for the token.
Yeah, I guess this was something that kind of occurred to me. I don't know if it makes a ton of sense, but I was thinking like why would a protocol like MarginFi or something want Carrot as collateral rather than like USDC or something? Because in a weird way, Carrot is just USDC deposited into MarginFi, and there's like this weird loop thing. I don't know. Like, how do you guys think about that?
Yeah, it can get like inception really quick, for sure. So there's a few things there. So one, very similar to like when Drift made this big announcement of Ondo coming in. So Ondo is like a tokenized T-bill yield bearing asset. He made a big deal of how like idle assets could be held in Ondo, in their YUSD, I think it is, or OUSD, um, and like as a yield bearing asset, for the greater pool. And I think that could work, in a similar kind of way where, okay, it's always earning yield. Like CRT helps liquidity in the system in general. Like it is saying, hey, all that capital is always deployed. It's not actually on the sidelines being idle. Now we do have to be careful of, like technically we really can't back CRT loans with CRT. You kind of get into like okay, that's like vaporware. That's it's not actually backed by a real asset anymore. But regardless of that, protocols that we do work with on like an integration side, Carrot can represent this revenue stream, similar to like a PayPal or Venmo. Like they make their money off of earning interest off of user deposits, who like they don't pass that interest on to. And so we've seen a lot of interest there, where uh, like a prediction market or something like Moonwalk. Everyone talks about Moonwalk on this, of things that are sitting in that pool for that 7 days for that competition, like could easily be held in Carrot and paid out in dollars, and the pool either gets a better deal at the end and they get the interest there, or like the protocol can say, great, it's $100 pool, it's now worth 101. We earned $1 and the 100 still got paid out, and like instantly adding like this revenue stream for them to do it. What we really hope, though, and I think you kind of started to touch on this, if you're familiar with Kamino's multiply product, I think it's one of the most popular like DeFi products out there. It's brilliant, and it's all centers around this like really unique relationship between an LST and Sol. Like an LST backed Sol loan is never going to get liquidated, because the APY of that LST is just pretty much always above the APY to borrow that Sol. And even if they cross, they're like offsides, it's going to take like 500 days at being offsides before it's like loan to value is in a liquidation state. CRT and USDC actually has that same relationship, where our CRT APY, and rates can be a little more variable, but like it's never really going to get off sides of USDC, because it's the yield bearing version. So if you can take the yield bearing version and pair it with the underlying asset that's not yield bearing, you can do some things like looping and multiplying that can really get to some really great rates. Like we've seen, even like we can get up to like 30-40% like APY on stable coins. And now it requires having supply. Like you need someone to like lend that money at a cheaper rate than you could earn by like holding CRT, but it's no different than how LSTs and Sol work. You're earning like 6% lending in Camino for your Sol when you could be earning like 9% holding that LST, but people still do it. And so we hope to see those products kind of be built on top of saying, hey, this is a liquid yield bearing token without directional risk. Okay, what can we do in DeFi that's like really cool because of that existing? The main barrier for us is just size and liquidity, depth of liquidity needs to be there.
Yeah, I feel like that does open up other things, because I remember like this time last year, I think MSOL depegged like really hard, and then it blew out a ton of people who were doing the looping strategy. So there's definitely things to think about there. Kind of going on a little bit of different topic of user acquisition. How do you guys think about kind of getting more people to hold Carrot, and like what are your kind of strategies to, I don't know, get it in more people's wallets?
Yeah, we think about this a lot. And in fact, like we're like 3 months live at this point for like public consumption of the token. And in some ways we've kind of felt a little stagnant. We're at about like 500 holders, something like that. And this is all like every startup's journey of finding that product market fit. Like who cares? Like who wants it? And why do they want it? I was talking to an advisor this morning and was like, hey, if I had $5 million, I would spend like 4.5 of it on marketing and outreach, and like user acquisition, because the name of the game for these types of financial products, similar to like a mutual fund or an index fund, is brand and trust. And like we got to earn that trust. And in some ways, it's just time in the market, and just like getting that name out there for people to like recognize and say, oh, this is great. I get something that I couldn't get on my own. I'm all in. I think we can do a lot better job on it, to be honest. Token 22 has been a little difficult. It makes it hard for us to do like liquidity incentives, because we can't use even like tools like Meteora, and Orca like just now added Token 22 support. So some of those traditional ways of liquidity mining, liquidity incentives and stuff, we haven't wanted to like turn to immediately. But certainly like some of those strategies should be put in place, and just like raise that general awareness. One thing we don't do very well that we're working to improve is to show performance. To like see like, okay, I bought at this price, here's how well it's done for me up until now, and make that like really shareable for people to show off and say, oh, I had $100 or I had $1,000. Now I have $110. You could too. Like, come check this out. It's kind of the blessing and the curse of being a token, because uh, it's so simple and so straightforward that you come to our site, like, there's like not much to it. Like, it's swapping. It's swap for a token. And I think we do a better job of highlighting the benefits that you're experiencing, and making it like more useful for you to like do stuff with. So yeah, that's certainly our next big focus is getting the word out there. We partnered with a lot of treasuries, which we thought was a good avenue to kind of show trust of like, hey, if these people trust it, like their user bases can trust it. And that's been okay, but I think we have a lot of room to grow in terms of like that user acquisition and building that trust with people.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money kind of, or a lot of stables flowing to Solana, so there's definitely like a lot of growth potential
Yeah.
and stuff like that. I guess speaking of kind of a new stable on Solana, you guys just announced that you're adding USDS into your pool. Why did you guys kind of make that decision?
Some of it's narrative, to be honest. People get excited. So one thing we've seen with other competitors, like, they grew a ton when PYUST came on board. Um, just because they offered like compounded on top of that, and the rates were so good. And for us to say we already have these other three, adding a fourth one in is trivial. Like, it took us an hour to add it in, which is great. And it just represents like good yield. Like, and this is part of the promise that people come to Carrot and say, okay, you're gonna actively manage and watch this for me. It's not an opt-in system. One thing we see in DeFi product wise is we tend to skew towards decentralized products, obviously. But practically what that ends up doing is it becomes kind of like a choose your own adventure configuration engine, configuration machine. You select your risk profile, like you opt in, you do everything. And that's like fine. Like, in some cases, I think that's like great and like expected and like a good way to go about it. But in other cases, I would say the best digital products I've ever worked on had really strong thought leadership and opinions, and kind of told you what you wanted and did it for you. And that's like where we want to be, where it's not, hey, come choose if you want USDS exposure and to kind of get the 30% yield. Hey, we're going to start like scaling that in and like test it and put it into our system automatically for you. Like, you could have left crypto and said, I come in once a year, I buy stuff, I leave, and you didn't like miss out on that narrative, or miss out on that opportunity. You trusted us to actively and responsibly manage that, and be on top of the new opportunities that are there for you.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So zooming out a little bit, from kind of your product, Carrot, what in the greater kind of crypto ecosystem has you excited?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. Has me excited. General adoption is great. I think we start to see more use cases where you say, oh, okay, I can see how this works. I've always believed like stablecoins are the big use case for crypto. Microtransactions, I think, are a huge use case for crypto. It truly is like not using the blockchain because you can and you think it's novel and cool, and it is faster and cheaper, and the business has more profit because of using this technology. I think we're starting to see that kind of come to the forefront. Um, I'm really intrigued by all these new yield bearing stables coming on. One thing that we debated a lot was like, that's not who we are. Like, that's not our position. We are not classifying ourselves as a yield bearing stable. However, if you look at it, what's the difference? Not much. That we started at $100, not $1. Like, that's probably the biggest like felt difference, but there's no real difference there. And part of the reason for it is I kind of think like a stable shouldn't be yield bearing. Like a stable is meant to be stable. And maybe like, I know there's like inflation just going like YBX or ISC or stuff. Um, so it's great to see like the growth there. But I'm really interested to see like the uptick in adoption and like who ends up really using it. I think PayPal has a strong case for the US user base, just because like I can redeem a PYUSD into a PayPal account 1-to-1. Like, they're guaranteeing that exchange rate, which is like, that's incredibly powerful. Like, that's like the best on off ramp in a lot of ways than like I could get from any other provider. But past that, I think it's difficult to see a use case where the user says, "Hey, I prefer, to use the less liquid version of a stable in my ecosystem, which is USDT for most ecosystems and USDC for Solana, um, in terms of like everyday hold and stuff." So uh, I am excited to like see more adoption on the stablecoin thing. I think we'll get better products as a result and more adoption just in like behind the scenes products. Um, but yeah, really interested to see how the market like ends up reacting once the incentives run dry and they're not like juicing the yields as much anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think this was a really good way to wrap things. Thank you for coming on and sharing what you have to say about Carrot.
Yeah. Actually, Jack, I had one question for you.
Yeah.
One thing that we explore a lot is I'm working on it literally right now. Is like APY calculations. It's one of these topics that if you know anything about math, what most people do, APY is this metric that you can really manipulate. Like the smaller time horizon you calculate APY, the less reliable it is. How do you, when you guys like are doing analytics and stuff, what do you guys see, or like how do you normalize or attempt to normalize or kind of even watchdog um, people who are like advertising these crazy APYs to kind of show off and find a way to like make that a trusted metric? I think a lot of people use APY as this main thing of like, oh, I get crazy APY, like JLP multiplied 99 plus APY.
Yeah.
And so you realize that you still have a negative P&L. So how do you guys think about, APY calculations?
Well, I say I don't really love to do APY calculations on things that aren't like dollar denominated. So even for JLP or something like that, I think it's kind of not the best thing to look at the APY of that necessarily. And then I kind of just like to do like a 1 month and 1 week like lagging indicator of price difference times that. And I
Mm-hmm.
and I and I guess from last cycle, like I mean, going through all the crazy stuff, it's like Ohm or all this weird thing where it's like a token that is floating, but then it offers an
Right.
APY. Like if the token, I would say if the token is floating, then the APY is just kind of like suspect in the first place. Like unless it's really dollar backed, you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to do things. And then even for the JLP stuff, I think what is really the APY is the delta neutral APY, where it's like minus the
Yep.
borrow costs of the other things, then you can really see. And then like it's good to do like a 7 or like some lagging indicator where it's not like this second's current APY, how much did we make in the last tick or something like that. It's more like a lagging thing. And then also it's like relative, like because you know back in March, all these protocols were giving 100%, and that was real because people were leveraging so hard. But like, and even now, it seems like the leverage is kind of building back up again. But you kind
Mm-hmm.
of want to look at like relative to the leverage in the market and see what protocols are actually making. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, we feel the same way. It's like a weird. The only real time APY thing is like lending protocols because it's programmatically set by the contract and like the utilization rates and stuff like that. That's real. But once you get outside of that, like I'm rewriting a whole system to be exactly like I use the share price on a rolling 7 day or 30 day or 10 day, whatever you choose, because like that is I held it, I bought it at this price, and I can sell it at this price over this time. Like that represents your actual return, and not some like, oh, it's 20% right now. So it's great. I'm glad confirmation moving in the right direction for how we how we personally do that.
Yeah, totally.